So I'm a big fan of the show Breaking Points with Crystal and Sagar, but I think they're falling short recently around their coverage around the war in Israel. Again, been an avid listener to that podcast for quite a while. I'm a premium member, paying my $10 a month to support their work. And at baseline, I think what they're doing is really, really important. They're providing an independent source of news that's really willing to criticize anyone, which I think is incredibly valuable and clearly in demand because they've really blown up, which is awesome. And I hope they continue to grow. Now, I have a feeling this video might reach a bit of a new audience. So my name is Preston Stewart. I make videos on YouTube and TikTok when they'll have me, which isn't always, about war, conflict, and national security subjects. One of the conflicts I've been spending a lot of time on recently is the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. So I wanted to discuss what I think is kind of a shortcoming in the recent coverage on Breaking Points about the war in Israel and what I hope is a constructive manner here. So I thought about just writing an email, but decided on a video because I think this is an important conversation, one where I very well could be wrong or just viewing all of this entirely incorrectly. And I'm sure I'm going to hear about that in the comments if I am. So I figured I'd put this out publicly, maybe spark some conversation, and then I'm sure that I'll learn something personally throughout this whole process. I also need to say that, in my opinion, Breaking Points does a much better job across the board in all of their coverage than just about any other major media. So my nitpicks here are nothing in comparison to some of the larger outlets. But those big outlets, they're not going to change anytime soon, like at all. Whereas I want Breaking Points to continue to succeed. So I thought it was worth bringing some of these up. So there's two main items I want to focus on. One is how the fighting in Gaza is being presented. And the second is the conversation around genocide. So starting with the coverage around the fighting on the ground in Gaza, one of the reasons that I personally enjoy Breaking Points is that they so often present both sides of an issue and allow the listener or the viewer, if it's on YouTube, to come to their own conclusion, something that not very many outlets do. But in this conflict, the war in Gaza, it feels more and more like a decision has already been made and the information is being presented through that lens. So overall, I do think the hosts, the four people that present information at Breaking Points, they're people of integrity and are genuinely trying to present factual information every single day. But from the outside looking in, it just looks like emotions may have taken over with their coverage of what's coming out of Gaza, which is understandable. When you get into the realities of war, it's gross, it's tragic, it's devastating. Like, we can be really awful. And the worst of us as people comes out when you see what happens in warfare. An emotional reaction to that, to war, to conflict, that's normal. A lack of an emotional reaction to war is something to be concerned about. Now, I'm getting into a bit of a personal take here, which I guess this whole thing is kind of a personal take. But I do think we should do our best to recognize emotional attachment and how that might affect our mindset when presenting an audience with information. So the outrage that's coming through about what you're seeing in Gaza is a good thing. And the stories of the Palestinian civilians caught in the middle here are stories that need to be told, continue to be told. However, without the context that all of this is happening amidst an ongoing military operation can lead the viewer or listener to think that the Israeli military is just exclusively targeting Palestinian civilians. For example, Hamas claimed responsibility for 63 attacks against Israeli targets in the past 8 days, which they say included a missile barrage towards Tel Aviv. I mean, there's very much an ongoing war where the fighting's intense every single day, and regularly there are rockets being fired by Hamas into Israeli territory against civilian targets. Now, there's still a place to argue that the Israeli response is disproportional or their tactics are not in line with what we would expect from a modern military. You can still have those conversations and have those feelings, but when you leave out or kind of minimize the Hamas military activity in Gaza, it can really make it seem to the average viewer, average listener, that the Israeli military is just kind of rampaging through Gaza rather than actively fighting a war against an entrenched enemy. The second item I wanted to bring up is around the conversation related to genocide in Gaza. So I'm recording this video on January 12th, which is the day that Israel's presenting their defense against the genocide allegations at the International Court of Justice brought forward by South Africa. So we should hear in the next couple weeks if the court considers that there is plausibility that a genocide is being committed in Gaza. And if they do, then a full investigation will kick off, which is, of course, likely to take years. Now, there are a lot of strong opinions on this one, ranging from the extremes really on both ends. And of course, everyone is entitled to their opinion and should voice it. However, I believe the coverage at Breaking Points recently has erred in definitively stating over and again that a genocide is occurring. This is, understandably so, an incredibly charged topic, which doesn't mean stay away from it, just treat with caution. I mean, in so many other cases, the Breaking Points team is quick to say something is alleged or that someone is accused of a crime or an act. But when it came to Israel committing genocide, the language has suggested over and again that that verdict has already been made. So what we're seeing in Gaza right now may or may not be classified as a genocide. But that's something the appropriate international court is hearing right now. Like, as I'm recording this video, that's what they are debating. These are the international institutions that we, as a people, over the previous decades, put together to make these decisions, right? So in turn, I think the genocide topic should be treated as a very important open question rather than a predetermined fact. A war can still be incredibly brutal with loads of civilian casualties, more than anyone would expect, and still not be classified as a genocide. That word is really important, really powerful, and really divisive in a lot of ways. So I think the responsible thing to do, the responsible way to treat this in this regard is to phrase that as the alleged genocide, or that Israel has been accused of genocide, while we wait, again, for the appropriate international court who's hearing the case right now to make their decision. In wrapping up and thanking everyone who stuck around, I'm really interested in your thoughts in the comments below. I understand the argument that at some point around certain issues, you can no longer stay silent. The idea that there's always going to be something so important that conditions dictate that you use your platform to try to do something, to try to shape the worldview as best you can. I get it. I can understand that. But I would caution that that is also likely the root cause of why we have a current distrust in mainstream media. I mean, at some point, they went from just providing information to trying to shape perception, and that pushed a lot of people away and led them straight to places like Breaking Points. And then to the Breaking Points team, but first off, big fan, keep up the great work. In listening to your reporting on the conflict, I can hear in your voices the emotions around what you're seeing in Gaza, and I don't want to come across as criticizing your humanity, which is incredibly important when looking at something as brutal as war. But I would say, again, in my humble opinion, it might be valuable to your audience to include more about the continued fighting with Hamas and to treat the genocide discussion as an allegation rather than a settled fact. I think both of those suggestions are in line with how you cover other events, even when there's a side of an issue that you don't really agree with. I just think there's a lot of value in explaining what's happening in this war, and that can be done in a way that doesn't justify anything that one side or the other is doing. It's not something I would expect from most media outlets, but it's something I know you guys can do because you have before. Again, keep up the great work. I'll continue to tune in. And for anyone not familiar with Breaking Points, you should be. I'll link their YouTube channel and podcast in the description below. And let me know what you think. I know this is a complicated, nuanced subject, but it's a smart audience. So very interested in your feedback. That's all I got for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time.